My name is Doug House. I'm chair of the Rock Island County Democrats and president of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association. The Democratic County Chairs Association is a statewide grassroots Democratic Party organization comprised of all 102 Democratic county chairs in Illinois. We're proud to be growing in our efforts to expand our mission in recruiting, training, and supporting Democratic Party candidates at all levels of our government. And we are certainly proud to have you all here tonight as we sponsor our second forum for the Democratic candidates for Attorney General. Many of you know the Democratic County Chairs for our annual brunch that we hold in Springfield during the state fair. Last year we had the largest attendance in our history. We're excited about making this year's brunch even bigger. Democrats from all over Illinois make the brunch an annual tradition, and I hope that you will follow us on Facebook and watch our website and sign up for our newsletter so you can be a part of that great tradition as well. Tonight's forum is an example of the Democratic County Chair's determination to give Illinois Democrats a chance to learn about the people who want to serve our state. Unlike any other office in Illinois, the Attorney General is the most independent. The Illinois Attorney General should ensure that the people of Illinois have a partner in defending the Constitution and someone who respects the separation of powers in our government. Tonight, we have 8 terrific candidates who are working to earn the votes of Democrats. We're looking forward to hearing from all of them. Make a note that the election day is Tuesday, March the 20th for this Democratic primary, and also remember that voting is critical and your participation in it essential. Let's not forget what Chicago's favorite son, Barack Obama, often reminded us, that the most important office in our land is that of citizen. As a citizen, it's our right and our duty to vote. Again, I thank you for being with us tonight. For those of you who are watching tonight on Facebook Live, welcome as well. Right now, I ask that you share our Facebook live stream with your friends and take the time to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We can be found at the ILDCCA or a quick search of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association. Let me also thank Blue Room Stream for helping us make this accessible to their subscribers and media outlets throughout the state and our nation. And of course, here in Chicago, it's my pleasure to get us started. Our moderator tonight is no stranger to politics. She has built a career as a thoughtful but tough journalist. Amanda Vinicky began her radio career with WUIS in Springfield, covering State House news. Today, she is a well-known professional featured on WTTW Chicago Tonight. Amanda has a very busy schedule, and so making it a true honor to us to have her here to help us tonight. Friends, please help me and welcome our moderator, Amanda Vinicky.
And good evening, everybody. It truly is my pleasure to be here. Of course, as a journalist, believe very much in the importance of keeping voters, residents of our state, informed about issues such as those that we'll be speaking about tonight. We, previously, the Illinois Democratic County Chairs, no longer Chairmen's Association, so notable change there, had a similar panel in Springfield, Illinois. That went by alphabetical order, and as somebody with whose last name, of course, starts with V, a very important change that I had requested for this particular forum, and that is tonight we will go in reverse alphabetical order instead. Therefore, our initial candidate, they're going to come out one by one, is Mr. Jesse Ruiz. Every candidate will begin with an opening statement, but we'll bring everybody out so they can all hear each other, right? This isn't a Miss America contest yet, maybe, who knows? All right. Next we have Nancy Rodering, please. Kwame Raoul. Pat Quinn. Renato Mariotti. Aaron Goldstein. Sharon Fairley. And keep those claps coming. Last but not least, Scott Drury. And go ahead, take a seat, give your hands a little bit of a rest, everyone. And we will, as I said, begin with a bit of an introduction by each of the candidates. So opening statements, we will go in that order. If you would like to, please go ahead. You each have 90 seconds, beginning with Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you, Amanda. So today we learned of Mick Mulvaney's plans for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Very ironic for the Trump administration. Mick says that the CFPB should act with humility and moderation. Again, very ironic for the Trump administration. In other words, what he's saying is the CFPB should abdicate its duties to protect consumers. It should drop suits against payday lenders like Golden Valley Lending and give them free rein to charge up to 950% interest to working families who want to just borrow against their future paychecks. This is why we need an attorney general who truly understands the struggles of working families. I'm the son of Mexican immigrants. My dad came here as a migrant farm worker with a third-grade education. I've been continuously employed since I'm 14 years old to help pay for my education. And thank God, because of the opportunities in this great state, I was able to go to the University of Illinois with only $300 in my pocket, graduate my degree in economics, be only $10,000 in debt, go on to the University of Chicago Law School, and had the honor of learning the law from Barack Obama and Elena Kagan, and then go to work as a lawyer and be involved in public service. I understand those struggles of working families, and I want to be your attorney general so I can protect families like mine and like yours. I want to be your advocate, your champion. I want to be your attorney general.
Thank you. Moving on to Ms. Rodering.
Good evening, and thank you, IDCCA and Doug and the local 399 engineers. Appreciate the chance to join everyone this evening. My name is Nancy Rodering, and I'm running for Attorney General because our city, our state, and our nation are in crisis. We need an Attorney General who is independent and experienced, a leader with a record of getting things done. I'm a mayor. I'm in my 7th year, but a little about my background. I went to Stanford. I majored in economics. I have an MBA from Northwestern, and I worked in finance at General Motors, and then came back to the University of Chicago for law school and practiced with McDermott, Will & Emery for a number of years. As a mayor, I've done what's expected. I've balanced my budgets. I've maintained my AAA bond rating. I've also stood up to the NRA, stood up to utilities, and created a legal aid clinic to help people with housing and immigration and domestic violence cases. We are watching as our civil rights are under attack. We're watching as our human rights are under attack. We're watching as the very fundamental rights of our democracy are under attack. It's so important right now to have an attorney general who understands how to lead. I've led a city for 7 years, who understands the importance of practicing law on behalf of those who don't have a voice. I've done that for decades. I look forward to the opportunity to talk with you tonight. My name is Nancy Rodering, and I hope I'll get your support. Thank you.
And Senator Raoul.
Good evening. My name is Kwame Raoul, and for those of you all who aren't familiar with the origin of that name, which is probably most of you all, I'm a son of Haitian immigrants who settled in Chicago in 1960. And I guarantee you they did not originate from an S-hole. I'm a proud son of a Haitian physician that served as a community physician for 30 years, never turning back a patient for their inability to pay. And that spirit is part of the reason why I'm running for Attorney General. I lost my father to prostate cancer, and 2 years ago I was diagnosed. That access that I had to health care saved my life and allowed me to stand before you as a survivor, ready and willing to serve. I've been practicing law for going on 25 years. I've been in the legislature for 13 years. 13 years ago, I had the blessing to replace Barack Obama in the state Senate. I fought for voting rights, passing the Voting Rights Act and a constitutional amendment protecting voting rights. I fought for access to health care, passing the enabling legislation for the Affordable Care Act. I fought to protect victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. I fought on a broad range of areas. And so I'm not running for Attorney General to do something new. I'm running for Attorney General to continue the work that I've already been doing. Thank you.
Governor Quinn, please.
Okay, my name is Pat Quinn, and I'm running for Attorney General to be a lawyer for the people of Illinois. That's the job definition. It's very hard for one person to take on a big corporation, whether it be a utility company or a bank or an insurance company. That's really what the Attorney General does on behalf of all the people. I've been a consumer advocate all my life. I helped start the Citizen Utility Board. This is the very first envelope of CUB that began 35 years ago, Illinois' largest consumer group. And the Attorney General has to work with the Citizen Utility Board to make sure that people get a fair shake, whether it's their gas bill, their phone bill, or their electric bill. The Attorney General over and over again in our state has been there for consumers working with the organization. And I think we need to make sure we continue that. I don't take campaign contributions from Commonwealth Edison or People's Gas or all these other utilities that are in the marketplace. I think it's important to be independent of them. I also think, as mentioned, it's important to stand up to Donald Trump. Trump is the president who is threatening our democracy, our fundamental freedoms, and state attorney generals all over the country have banded together to take on his unconstitutional and hateful behavior, particularly in the area of health care. I walked across our state from the Mississippi River all the way to Lake Michigan on behalf of decent health care for everyone. I signed the bill in Illinois for the Affordable Care Act that's added 1 million people to health care in our state. And it's very important we not let Trump take it away. Thank you.
My name is Renato Mariotti, and I'm running for Attorney General. Unlike the other people up here, I'm not a politician or an insider, so I'll tell you a little bit about who I am and where I'm from. I was born in Chicago to two parents who didn't graduate from college and both worked 2 jobs to put me through school. And thanks to their hard work, I went to the University of Chicago, to Yale Law School, and ultimately I was hired by Pat Fitzgerald to be a federal prosecutor. And I did that for almost a decade, prosecuting everything from child exploitation to human trafficking. But I was best known as a white-collar prosecutor, taking on people who victimize our seniors, the vulnerable, people who took advantage of the system for their own benefit. About 1.5 years ago, after a number of difficult trials and an even more difficult fight against cancer, which I was fortunate enough to beat, I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I thought I was going to be slowing down. I ended up speeding up, and partly because Donald Trump soon became our president, and I have been talking everywhere, on television, magazines, newspapers, social media, all over the place about the evils of the Trump administration and how we can use the legal system to fight back against them. And that's one big reason why I'm running for Attorney General, to fight against the Trump administration, to limit his presidency, and to fight for working families like mine, people who are struggling to make ends meet and need an Attorney General who will fight for them. I'm running a grassroots campaign that relies on tiny contributions, under $100 each from lots of people across the state and the volunteer efforts of them, and I hope I'll have your support and join that campaign. My name is Renato Mariotti, running for Attorney General.
Thank you. And Mr. Goldstein.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out, braving the cold. My name is Aaron Goldstein, and I'm running to be your Attorney General. But more importantly, I'm running to be the greatest advocate for justice you have ever seen. Back in 2000, I graduated from law school, and I applied for one job, and that was to be a Cook County public defender. If you recall back then, 2000, the economy was going very well. While many attorneys and many of my colleagues were chasing the money to be corporate attorneys or being tough on crime to become a prosecutor, I wanted to represent people who couldn't afford an attorney. I wanted to represent people who were underrepresented, people who had no hope. To stand by the Constitution, which says we all have the right to an attorney, to have a zealous advocate for us all. And that's why I became a lawyer, and that's why I want to be Attorney General. What I will do as Attorney General is a bold, progressive agenda with three very important points. Number one, we must stand up to the big powers that are hurting us every single day, the big banks, the big corporations, and Donald Trump. And we must call him what he is. He is a tyrant that is violating our rights every single day. And as Attorney General, we must stand up to him. We must have real criminal justice reform, which ends mass incarceration. This racist drug war we must end. We must end cash bail and stop the police killings that are going on every day and have police accountability. And finally, we must fight corruption. That's what I'll do as Attorney General. My name's Aaron Goldstein. Thank you.
And Ms. Fairley, please.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharon Fairley, and I'm also a candidate for Attorney General. I'm a mom, I'm an attorney, and I'm a proud but very concerned Democrat. Ladies and gentlemen, I entered this race because I and the people that I know and love are outraged by the Trump administration's attacks on our civil rights, our health, and our well-being. And I'm frustrated by the failure of our political leaders to solve the pressing problems our state faces, leaving us stuck in a never-ending situation where we cannot move forward. So rather than the career politicians who I believe have so dismally failed us, our state needs a new kind of leadership. Our state needs the kind of experienced and independent leadership that I'm uniquely qualified to bring to this important office. Everything about my personal and professional life has prepared me for this role. I was born in Washington, D.C., raised by two public servants, and I was raised to believe that you go out and get the best education possible and then use it to do good in this world. I have an undergraduate degree from Princeton, an MBA from the Wharton School, but then I went back to school later in life to get my law degree to dedicate my life to public service. Since then, I've only represented the citizens of Illinois, first as an assistant attorney general, then as a federal prosecutor, and then also as a leader in police reform. You can count on the fact that I know how to lead an agency responsible for complex matters because I've already done it as the chief administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, I've only served the citizens of Illinois as an attorney, and I want to continue in that path as your next Attorney General. Thank you.
And finally, Representative Drury.
Good evening. My name's Scott Drury, and I'm running for Attorney General to clean up the state of Illinois. I'm an adjunct law professor at Northwestern. I'm a practicing attorney for about 20 years now. And before running for Attorney General, I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office working under Pat Fitzgerald for about 7.5 years, working on public corruption cases. There, I saw the worst in our government. I saw close up how bad it can be when our government doesn't work for us. And I took those politicians, and it didn't matter what party they were in, and we put them where they belonged. We put them in prison. And I realized that there was more that I could do, not just being reactive as a prosecutor, but maybe I could be more proactive. So in 2011 and 2012, I ran for state representative, and I had the success of winning, and I'm now serving my third term. And when I got into the General Assembly, I picked up where I left off. I started fighting corruption from the inside, proposing broad reforms to the system, getting rid of the cozy relationship between lobbyists and legislators, making sure that our government works for you and it doesn't work for politicians. As a state representative, I have stood up to the most powerful interests in the state. I've taken on the NRA and won, and we've banned assault weapons throughout the district that I represent. I've stood up to the big insurance companies, making sure that they can't cancel your insurance because you have a pre-existing condition. And I'm just getting started. I want to be your Attorney General because I know that Illinois government doesn't work for the public, it works for the politicians, and that has to change. I'm running for Attorney General, not just to earn your votes, but I hope to earn your trust. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for those introductions. For the next portion of this forum, each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond. I neglected to mention earlier that we do have, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but a very kind timekeeper here. So we are all free to avoid looking at our watches and or phones, really, and instead watch that. I will have to, of course, cut you off if anybody goes past that allotted time. For the initial question, I would like to know, is there an Illinois statute that you could see yourself directing your assistant attorneys general to not enforce? What would that be and why? starting with Mr. Ruiz.
There was a challenge to women's right to reproductive rights. I would not enforce that. I would choose not to litigate that. I would believe it was unconstitutional. If I believe something's unconstitutional, as the Attorney General has done, I would not do that.
Nothing on the books currently, however.
Yep, no.
And anything more to add, or we can
That's
go
the
under
one.
60?
That's the one I
good
would
by
start
all
with.
of us, right, guys? All right. Mayor Rodering, please.
There is currently a law in the books that requires parents to be notified if their child who is underage wishes to have an abortion. That, to me, is a problem because not everybody has a loving family. Not everybody has a solid situation where they can go talk to their parents. And being the parent of 4 young men, teenage men, and men in their young 20s, I know how that age group thinks. And feel that that's putting a lot of people at risk. I think if you're in that situation, you should not have to go get your parents' permission to have an abortion. I'm a proud member of the board of Planned Parenthood, have fought for a woman's right to choose for decades, and that's one law in the books that I think needs to change, but certainly would not enforce.
Thank you. Senator Raul.
I think I echo Nancy's position on parental notification, but in addition to that, I think oftentimes in prosecuting criminal law, there's an opportunity to utilize discretion to shift what a charge may be in order to be able to recognize the unique circumstances of an individual offender that may not mandate that they spend the amount of time that certain minimums may require them to spend.
Thank you very much. Going down the line there, Governor Quinn.
Well, right now, under the law of our state, the people of Chicago, where I live, have to endure an appointed school board, and I think that's unconstitutional. I don't think it should be defended. I think the Attorney General should litigate the fundamental voting rights and taxpayer rights of all the people of Chicago to have an elected school board. Every other school district in Illinois elects their school board, except us here in Chicago. That law is, in my view, unconstitutional. It should be struck down. I certainly don't think the Attorney General should defend it. I think the Attorney General should be on the side of the people to strike it down as unconstitutional violation of our taxpayer rights and our voting rights.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
There's been a number of good answers here. Like Ms. Rodering, I don't like the parental notification law, and I think, frankly, we need to work to change that in Illinois. I think that we should have an elected school board, although I don't think that that necessarily violates the United States or Illinois constitutions. I mean, one law that did violate the Illinois Constitution that was passed recently and signed into law by Governor Quinn was the SB 1 that took away pensions from people in this state, and that was, frankly, something that really upset me because there are a lot of people who worked their entire lives to get a pension, and we had a law that was passed that was clearly violative of the Illinois Constitution. Anybody who would look at the Illinois Constitution would see it. And we had an 7-0 decision by the Illinois Supreme Court that upheld that. It was an example of politicians putting the Illinois Attorney General in a tough position. And if I was in that position, I would refuse to fight for and defend a law that violated the Illinois Constitution, period.
Mr. Goldstein, please.
Can't pick just one, but since that's the question, we must be dutiful to the question. Not that the Attorney General necessarily prosecutes these cases, but state's attorneys all over the state prosecute these cases. Marijuana, it should be legal, and if the legislature is not going to move on that, and quite frankly, I think they've been waiting way too long, it should be legal, and since it's not legal at this point, it should not be prosecuted. So marijuana should be legal, and I would not be prosecuting those cases.
And Ms. Fairley.
So if I had to pick just one, and this is a law that's not necessarily prosecuted by the Attorney General, but there's a law that I believe needs to be changed and as soon as possible, and that's the law that governs the use of lethal force by law enforcement. I believe that the law creates a standard that is way too low and that it needs to change, and it's not kept up with societal norms on this issue, and this is something that I feel strongly about, and I put a platform on my website about how I would go about changing this law already.
And finally, go ahead.
There are two things that I think need to be changed. Number one is this issue of the General Assembly stealing your money. And they do it through nice terms called fund sweeps or borrowing. But what they're doing is there's dedicated money that people pay into special funds in the state of Illinois that are supposed to go to certain things. They're supposed to go to programs that benefit all of you, and then the General Assembly says, well, we're not going to use it for that. We're going to put it into the general fund and we're going to spend it. It's theft. I've talked about it on the floor of the House. I think it's illegal, and I certainly wouldn't defend those laws that put those fund sweeps into place. It's probably going to happen in the next few weeks. We're going to do that, and it's just pure theft by the state of Illinois. The other thing that needs to be dealt with is the issue of the Attorney General being able to prosecute public corruption. It's my position that the Attorney General currently has that power. There's some people who believe that the Attorney General doesn't, but I'm certainly not going to enforce a law that prevents your Attorney General from dealing with public corruption and outsources it to the federal government. That's wrong.
Thank you very much. Pensions has already come up, and of course we are in a union hall, so let's just get that right out open in the air. There has been a lot of talk in Springfield about a model known as, quote, consideration. Outside of whether or not you support that in theory, do you believe that the consideration model is legal? Could you please explain your philosophy? Go ahead, Mr. Ruiz.
Going back, okay.
Sorry, I guess, yeah, being at the end isn't really in your favor this time
'cause
around, huh?
we were told we were going to rotate the questions. That's why I was thinking, like, I'm safe until the next round, but that's fine. No, I think we've learned that it wasn't, and you know, I would like to see a solution where we contractually agree to modify the pensions going forward. I don't think you can change the deal on somebody who's 20, 30 years into a career. And I don't know how much consideration you could give somebody. And that's, you know, if you think of it practically, we're in this problem because we can't afford to fund the pensions, and how are we going to afford to fund sufficient consideration? And so the adequacy of the consideration would be in question. However, if two parties contractually agree to modify a deal, then I would hope that that would be found legal and the courts would uphold that modification. But if we were just saying some amount of consideration would do the trick would be the adequacy of that consideration.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rodering, please go ahead.
I just think it's important that when people take on employment and they have essentially a contractual agreement with their employer, us, they need to know that when they retire, they'll have a secure retirement. We know that so many of our first responders and our teachers don't qualify for Social Security. The pension is the only thing that they have to make sure that they have a secure retirement. So we cannot change the course in the middle of the conversation. And when people sign on to serve the public, to protect us, we need to make sure that we're there for them when they are wrapping up.
But is it legal, the consideration model? Is that legal, do you believe, under the state constitution?
I think it's not, and I think it is very difficult to measure and to be able to fairly compensate people. So I would say it is not.
Thank you.
So certainly,
go ahead, Senator Rowe.
Yeah, so certainly the court has spoken, and we have a firm decision from the High Court, and I think no, in answer to your question, particularly if you try to do a consideration deal where you're dictating to everybody what their consideration is. You can modify contracts with an individual, but it's difficult to do that legislatively, so I would say no. The focus needs to shift into generating appropriate revenue to keep our promise to all of the public employees, and I've been in support of lifting the mandate of a flat tax. I've sponsored resolutions to do just that. We need a progressive income tax in the state of Illinois, so we can adequately fund not only the promise we've made to retirees and public employees, but to all of those who need the services of the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Governor Quinn.
Well, I think anything has to be individual. That's what the court said. There was a footnote in that decision that indicated that if the consideration was free and voluntary by the individuals, it could be considered. So it's a little bit of a, I think, gray area from the court decision. My view is similar to what we have just heard. When I was governor, I paid the pension every year. Prior to my time as governor, both Republican and Democratic governors for decades did not put the proper amount of money into the pension account. I did for 6 straight years. It was very difficult. It was during a recession. I think you need to properly invest in that pension account, whatever the amount is, every year. I think the Attorney General needs to enforce that. I also think it's important to make sure that we have adequate revenue for all the other services of government, and I do support a progressive income tax. I'm the one who signed a bill to raise the income tax on millionaires in order to help provide that revenue.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Consideration, that not only was that rejected unanimously by the Supreme Court, footnote or no, but it also, frankly, not only is it illegal, it was really a trick on people who spent a lot of their lives earning a pension. I mean, what that was essentially taking money out of your pension and giving you something back that was worth less, okay, because they didn't have enough money to pay for the full amount of the pension. You don't have to be a lawyer to realize that that's just a scam of some kind, okay? And frankly, any lawyer worth their salt could read that and know that it violated the Illinois Constitution because it plainly says you can't take away people's pensions. And yet, I'm surrounded by legislators who voted for that and a governor who signed it and forced unions to spend millions of dollars litigating against the state and the Attorney General's office a lot of time and energy fighting to uphold a piece of legislation that was clearly unconstitutional. And at the end of the day, after all those resources wasted, we have an unconstitutional law, and we're back in the same spot with pensions. And the question's up to all of you. Do you want the same mess we've had in Springfield? If you don't, stop electing the same politicians.
Moving on to Mr. Goldstein.
Everything, obviously, you have to look at the specific law, but I don't believe it's constitutional, and it's very simple. Keep your promise. Government workers became employees for the government to do public service, and in exchange for not a very high salary, their benefit, in essence, was a pension that they had paid into for years and years and years. I don't see why we keep attacking workers' pensions. Let's come up with a different way to bring the revenue in. I mentioned one way in the law that I wouldn't enforce. I think that would be a very good way to bring in other revenue, progressive income tax. There's many other ways to do it, but the Supreme Court, and I think our conscience, has spoken. Keep your promise. And when someone agrees to work for the government and pay into their pension for as long as they've been working, they should get the full value of that pension.
This is another one of the areas, this is a perfect example, I think, of the failure of our leadership to actually take action and to do something that's actually going to work and move our state forward. I believe that this plan was unconstitutional on its face, and I also believe that the people who put it out there knew it was unconstitutional on its face. And how do we know that? Because of the 5 pensions that could have been affected by this law, they left out the pensions for the judges who would be reviewing this piece of legislation when it was litigated. So that's how we know. So I find it really kind of interesting that here we have the sponsor of the bill and the governor who signed the bill now sort of changing their tune on that. So this is just another example of our political leadership failing to actually do stuff that works, and that's why we need new leadership.
I think the answers to this question show why we need to have somebody who has some experience with these issues. I sit on the pension committee in the House, and I just want to make clear that the bill that was unconstitutional, SB 1, was not the consideration model. The consideration model is a new proposal that says that if somebody wants to give up a benefit in return for something from the state of Illinois, can that person accept it? Now, the model that's been proposed by President Cullerton is a bad model. It's the extortion model. It's what I've called it in committee. It says, you shall take this benefit in return for something else. You can't do that. That's no different than someone coming to a restaurant if you're an owner and said, I think you need protection. And you say no, and then they throw a bomb through your window and they say, how about now? That's not constitutional. But if someone went to every single person who had a pension in the state of Illinois and said, hey, what would you be willing to take from the state of Illinois in order to give up some of your benefits? And the person said, I'd be willing to take X, Y, or Z. They have every right in the world to do that. That's the consideration model. And if that is a model that we can propose and that people would take and they're not forced to take it, then absolutely, that's their choice. But that's what we're talking about, not SB1, and that's why we need someone with experience.
Thank you very much. And we will give you a break, Mr. Ruiz, I promise. So for this question will first go to you, please, Mayor Rodering. And this is a question that was submitted. We had some by organizations that have an interest in the outcome of this race. This comes from the AFL-CIO of Illinois. And that is, do you believe that workers' compensation insurance carriers in Illinois should be more strictly regulated to ensure that Illinois employers are paying the lowest possible premiums or costs?
I think we need to make sure that they're paying sufficiently so that the insurance fund has what it needs to meet the actuary exposure of the employers. Obviously, you want to provide a balance to employers that they're able to stay in business, but it's more important that we make sure that people who put their lives on the line, who do the work, are adequately compensated if they end up being injured on the job. If you end up with a short shrift of a fund, it's going to be the laborers and the workers who pay, and it's not fair. If they're doing their job, it's a contract that they're making with their employer to have a safe workplace and to be fairly compensated if they end up injured on the job.
Thank you. Senator Raoul, please.
Yes, absolutely yes. I spent an entire session negotiating a workers' comp bill that has saved money, but those savings have not been passed on to employers. So there's a problem, and the problem lies with the insurance companies not passing on those savings and reaping the profits instead. And so I think there needs to be some regulation. I'm working on legislation right now to move ourselves towards that. But absolutely, we've reformed workers' compensation. Governor Rauner may not realize it. He was late to the game, but we will not engage in a race to the bottom, as has been the case in other states. We're not going to take away benefits from legitimately injured employees.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's very important to protect injured workers, and that's why we have this law for workers' compensation. And I did sign the bill that reformed that whole process. It was a very important bill, and it has produced savings. The problem is that the insurance companies have benefited from the savings and haven't passed on those benefits to employers across the state. So I don't think there's any question that we need a strong law in Illinois enforced by the Attorney General to make sure that the insurance carriers, when it comes to workman's comp, actually share that savings with their clients, with those who are buying this insurance. In fact, I really think we need to organize against insurance companies, period, in Illinois, not just workers' compensation, but whether it's car insurance or health insurance or any other kind of insurance. I think we need the same kind of consumer group that we have for the Citizen Utility Board taking on utilities. We need the same thing for consumers taking on these insurance companies that aren't fair to their customers and are gouging people in a wrong way.
I do think citizen action is important, but I think more important is the action of, frankly, the Attorney General, because we need to have an Attorney General being a watchdog, not only when it comes to workman's comp insurance, but to a variety of areas where you have industries that are, frankly, getting money that they are not necessarily passing along to consumers in the way that they're supposed to, or in the case of other industries like utilities, gaining money that more than they're entitled to, like a rate of return, for example, on some of their investments. You have to have an Attorney General who's going to be a watchdog, watching the insurance companies, the corporations, the utilities, to make sure that they are doing, they are not pilfering the people of Illinois. And that's why it's important to have somebody. I mean, I'm somebody who is not taking special interest money from the utilities and from these insurance companies, and I think it's important to have somebody who doesn't have those conflicts of interest in office, who will be very aggressive in looking at insurance companies, utilities, and others.
So I think you're going to hear a lot of yeses. There's a yes for me. Look, the Attorney General is the defender of us, is the defender of the people of the state of Illinois, and that's what I will be as Attorney General. So obviously, in these situations where insurance companies are taking advantage of us, we need a watchdog, we need an individual that's going to protect all of us, and that's what the Attorney General really is and should be. And I really think that the Attorney General for too many years has been too passive in fighting and defending all of us. And we need a proactive Attorney General that will do that, and I will do that. So there's no question whatsoever that you need the independence, and as Mr. Mariotti said, I also am not taking money from those big interests as well. And it is important that you have independence, because when you are regulating a particular agency or corporation, if you're getting money from them, most likely you're not going to be as good a watchdog of them.
I believe that workers' rights and the civil rights and the health and well-being of working families are under siege by both the Trump administration and the Rauner administration. So as Attorney General, I would work to do anything that is possible under the law and within the powers of the office to protect workers and working families. This is an area that's really important, and yes, I would also agree that regulation of this issue is appropriate to the extent that it is harming workers and workers' families.
So I don't want to belabor the point because you've already heard from 7 people. Obviously, we want to protect our workers, and we want to make sure that they are getting the health care and the treatment that they need should they be injured on the job. One aspect we haven't talked about, or haven't heard a lot about today about the Attorney General's office, it's not just about enforcing the current law. It's about advocating for where you think the law should be. The Attorney General is one of the biggest advocates in the state of Illinois. They come from a platform of trust. So if the Attorney General sees an issue and says, hey, this issue needs to be fixed, we need to reform workers' compensation, but not in a way that is going to send workers to the emergency rooms and not have them get treatment, but in a way that is going to drive down premiums and make it easier and make sure that the benefits are still there, the Attorney General should be on the front lines of doing that. One of the biggest issues with the workers' comp program, is that there is not enough competition amongst companies. And so because you have a monopoly, they can charge whatever they want. The Attorney General should be finding out ways, thinking of ways to break that up to make sure that there's an active market that brings down premiums naturally.
Thank you very much. The next question will begin with Oh, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting you. Oh, all right. Mr. Ruiz, go
First you
ahead.
pick on me, then you forget me. You know,
Yeah.
no.
Sorry.
No, teasing. Well, now you're going to hear it for the 8th time. Yes, it should be regulated. and I concur with just about everything. That's the one thing you get to do when you're amongst Democrats. We tend to agree on some hard issues, which is a good thing. But again, seeking out the opportunities to make greater efficiency, to protect the rights of workers, and to make sure we do have a state that's more hospitable to employers, that there's a balance and leveling of the playing field that I've called it a number of times. And it's not balanced today. It's not a level playing field for workers and for small business owners as well. So we've got to protect the interests of both, and making sure that anybody who's harmed on the job has a way to be made whole and doesn't have to go into catastrophic debt because of any accident they may have.
Thank you. Glad we got you in there. All right. And now we have a question going first to Senator Raoul. And that is, could you please name an Illinois Supreme Court case that you admire, respect, and why?
Well, I think probably Minerva v. Weems. It says that the health care rights of retirees should be protected, because when you think about people who given their life to public service, when they're in their later years, is the wrong time to suggest that you're going to take away this access to health care.
Thank you very much. Moving on down the line, Governor Quinn.
Well, I'm very partial to Coalition for Political Honesty versus State Board of Elections, 1980. That's the only time that people in the history of Illinois, 200 years, that people have been able to petition a constitutional amendment on the ballot and then vote for it and make it part of our Constitution. It was quite a controversial case. Members of the legislature, Democrats and Republicans, passed a law making it very difficult for people to pass petitions. And we gathered almost 500,000 names, and there was an effort by the State Board of Elections to keep it off the ballot. A lot of money was spent to keep it off the ballot, but our Supreme Court, by a clear majority, said that the right of initiative, the right of people to pass petitions and put issues on the ballot, is a fundamental right, and strict scrutiny must be applied at all times in the history of Illinois to anyone passing petitions. This is the best way for the people to speak, and I think that'll be a decision that'll long last.
I agree with Governor Quinn that that was a very good decision. Frankly, I think that we need to have more citizen participation in our democracy. I also, obviously, I talked just a moment ago about the decision recently striking down SB 1, and I think that was a good decision, and frankly, one that held our politicians accountable when they were trying to play tricks and hurt retired people in this state in order to pay for the fact that they hadn't been funding our pensions. So I think that's an important decision as well. But obviously there are decisions that we can all be critical of that the Supreme Court has made. I mean, there are constitutional guarantees we all have, like, for example, the right to a healthful environment, the right to high-quality education, that are not given proper meaning because of decisions by the Illinois Supreme Court, and I will fight to give meaning to those constitutional provisions because everyone in this state, no matter where you live, deserves a high-quality education and deserves to live in a healthful environment.
I feel like I'm back in law school. I have to remember cases now. Of recent note, it's interesting when you ask the favorite Supreme Court decision. I think of all the decisions that I wish we actually had. Giving rights when we're talking about education, the rights of individuals to have a fair education. You have a U.S. Supreme Court case which basically doesn't give strict scrutiny to individuals who can't afford, who are low income, and to have equal protection when it comes to education. So I'm being more optimistic. But I think the most important Supreme Court case that was handed down in the last few years, and quite frankly is the reason why we're here, is a Supreme Court case that rejected and found the pension bill unconstitutional. It was unfortunately a tough pill to swallow, but very important for the protection of all of us.
So I would agree that the Supreme Court decision on the pension reform bill is a great case, and it's a great read. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to, because they did a fantastic job of explaining exactly why that particular piece of legislation was unconstitutional. But I have another favorite, and unfortunately, I'm blanking on the name of it. But what this case was about was the powers of the Attorney General. And basically what the Supreme Court said in this case was one of the agencies, I believe it was the Environmental Protection Agency, challenged the Attorney General because the Attorney General refused to take the position that that agency wanted them to take in a piece of litigation. So the agency wanted to go around the Attorney General and hire another law firm to represent them in this litigation. And the Supreme Court said, you know what? Absolutely not. The Attorney General has her own discretion to go about pursuing her powers in the way that she thinks is appropriate. And just because you are differing in opinion with her doesn't mean that that's a conflict of interest from a legal perspective, which would require the Attorney General to step aside and let somebody else take on that representation.
During the debates on Senate Bill 1 that some of the other candidates have been talking about, there were a lot of people in the General Assembly, both in the Senate and the House, who didn't really want that bill to pass because they didn't want it ever to go to the Supreme Court. And so it was an easy way to build uncertainty into every retiree's life, not knowing what was ever going to happen. And on the floor of the House, when that bill was being debated, I said, we got to get it out of the House and we have to send it across the street because there's only 7 people that can tell us the answer to this question that we refuse to answer. And the Supreme Court, I was glad, and I actually went to watch the argument. It did its job, and it didn't do its job 4-3. It wasn't 4 Democrats to 3 Republicans, or 3 Democrats and 1 Republican. It was 7-0. And it was a very thoughtful decision, because what it did is it slapped the General Assembly. The theory was that this is an emergency and we need to take away the benefits. And the Supreme Court said, really, because you just lowered taxes? If it's such an emergency, why did you lower taxes at the same time you're coming to us? We're not going to help you. We're not going to bail you out. And they did the right thing. They sent it back to the people that caused the problems instead of bailing those people out.
Again, I'm going to concur with that one because, again, it established the rights of those that were set forth in the Constitution of workers' pensions to be protected, and to make sure that the General Assembly goes back and looks for another way to find the solution to the problem, not on the back of workers who've earned the right to those pensions.
Please, Ms. Rotering.
I concur, but I'd also like to add Madigan v. ICC, and that was a case that followed the summer of 2011 when we had numerous storms rolling through northern Illinois, and ComEd was claiming that there weren't sufficient numbers of people impacted by one particular storm that would render them responsible for paying damages. Lisa Madigan filed suit. The City of Highland Park and I provided testimony and data, and we ended up changing the way damages were quantified based on storm damage to people throughout Illinois, and as a result, got all kinds of settlement money back so that we were able to have investment in our infrastructure and a much more reliable electrical system in northern Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Senator Rowell, I believe you're last for this one, or did you start? You started? I'm sorry. I should really be checking things off. Yeah, go ahead. Or actually, let's begin then with, okay, so we've got Governor Quinn. If you were not running for this office, which of the 7 remaining candidates would you cast a vote for?
Well, I think all of them are loving sons and daughters of loving mothers.
I've heard you say that before.
And what mother wants to pick one of 7? So I really admire the ability of each of the candidates to enter the arena. I think it's very important for our democracy to have qualified people run for office. That's what democracy looks like. I think we're benefited in Illinois by having robust and civil debate about important issues. I've gone to every forum so far that we've had, and we've had 17 or 18, more to come. And I think that's really the best way to pick a person. And, you know, we still have many more debates, Amanda, so it's hard to pick someone
Filibuster.
at this juncture.
All right, gotta love how politicians answer a straight question, right? I'll answer the question. Maybe I haven't been doing this long enough. But look, if I wasn't in the race, I would be voting for Sharon Farrelly because I worked with her at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I think she's a fine attorney and very qualified, and I think you know, if she would do a very good job. So that would be my second choice in the race.
Whoever came up with these questions, you guys are great. This is obviously a difficult question, and I think I'll follow Mr. Mariotti and be a politician, I guess. You're not going to get a straight answer from me. Here's the reality. I have a lot of disagreements with a lot of my colleagues, but I've gotten to know all of them, and I have a high amount of respect for all of them. You have before you, and forgive me for including myself in this, 8 highly qualified attorneys. And I'll just go sort of the reverse and tell you who not to vote for, and it's anyone that's a Republican. It's serious. I've been telling many people, and I mean this sincerely, I think this race is more important than the governor's race. The power the Attorney General has to stand up for all of us is so crucial. If it goes in a Republican's hands, supporters of Donald Trump, supporters, hopefully we beat Bruce Rauner, but supporter of Bruce Rauner, we're in bad shape. So all 8 of us are wonderful human beings.
I really am very grateful to Renato for his comments. I appreciate his work as well. I think there are some great attorneys before you this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think that what we're going through right now is a process where you will all be able to assess their strengths and weaknesses and decide which one that you think is going to be the best one for the job. I think that what you're starting to hear is that there are some differences among us in the way we think and the values that we bring to the office, and your decision will be whether those values comport with your own. And so I think that you will have a tough decision to make, but I look forward to that decision, and I hope that you'll pick me.
I think one of the biggest travesties about the race for Attorney General is that it is a race for Attorney General. This shouldn't be an elected position. It shouldn't be a partisan position. It should be a position where people can say that person is doing the right thing regardless of whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. So when looking at the other candidates, I would be looking for someone who is espousing the values that I'm running on, someone who has independence, someone who has shown a history of standing up for the right things, not because they're politically beneficial, but because they're the right thing to do, even if they're not politically beneficial. I'd look to the money and where the contributions are coming from. Is somebody saying, well, this is a really tough race, and so I need to take money from the power companies, and I need to take money from this and that, because if I don't, I may not be able to compete? Or is it somebody who's going to say, look, this is a tough race, I'm a tough person, and I'm going to do what it takes to win the race, but I'm going to do it ethically. Those are the people that I would be looking at in this race, and there's a few of them, and so I'm not going to name them individually, but I encourage everybody to look at all of our records, you know, not just what we're saying here today, but look at our records and make the decision on your own, and I think you'll see that there's a big difference between some of us and the rest of us.
Mr. Ruiz.
Well, I will follow suit in saying that we luckily have 5 more weeks to make this decision. So luckily, we're not asking anybody to make this decision today, and I wouldn't either. And I do echo those comments that I think you're going to look at some of the differences of us. Everybody is highly qualified, and a number of us share an alma mater as well. And so there are a lot of similarities in terms of qualifications, and it's a great field, and I've gotten to know folks on this campaign and like them, and some of whom I'm going to go to dinner with afterwards, you know, but I think you all have to make sure that you look and see what are our life experiences, what are, you know, our backgrounds, you know, what is the motivation, what is our lifelong commitment to service, and hopefully we will all get to that point of being able to make that decision on March 20th.
It's really been a pleasure to get to know these 8. And they're qualified, they're strong. You see before you a group of really passionate advocates, every single one of us. There's an important race going on in November, and that's, I think, something that you need to consider. We're running against somebody who already has a $10 million pledge from Bruce Rauner, who has already stated that she is opposed to a woman's right to choose. She's opposed to marriage equality. She thinks Donald Trump is doing a great job. We need to make sure that the person that we pick on March 20th can absolutely beat that person in November, because this is really an important time in our state's history and in our nation's history, and we want to make sure that the person who's serving us as Attorney General is serving our democratic values.
So I'm gonna take the punt on this too. I think there's, and I appreciate Renato for being the only one to actually answer the question, but it's tough. It's really tough. I think it's been said, there's a field of highly qualified candidates, and whoever's nominated on March 20th, I pledge to support that person against the nominee on the other side, because it's clear from Governor Rauner's lips that he says he wants Attorney General that's loyal to his administration. I don't think that's the job of the Attorney General, and so I will do everything. If somehow I am not you all's choice, which I hope that's not the case, I will do everything to elect whoever the nominee is.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Let's. Could you please describe Mr. Where are we at? Mr. Mariotti. Yes, it's your first. Okay. A case. The case that you are most proud of having litigated, and for those of you who perhaps have not litigated a case in recent memory, what case have you most effectively put to use your legal acumen or law degree?
It's sad that you have to add that disclaimer to it, because frankly, I think the Attorney General should be an attorney job, and we should have an Attorney General who knows what it's like to litigate cases, knows what it's like to try cases when they're supervising people who are going to be litigating and trying cases. The case that I'm most proud of litigating I was the first prosecutor in the country to indict and convict a high-frequency trader. That was a very, very difficult case to put together. I had to defend the constitutionality of a law that had never been prosecuted before. I had to go up against a big New York Wall Street law firm and beat them when I had 10 lawyers on the other side against me. I had to explain to a jury what high-frequency trading was and futures contracts and all sorts of complicated things. And I was very proud that after a couple weeks of deliberation, a couple weeks of a trial, that we had a jury verdict guilty on all counts after 40 minutes of deliberation. And that was because people, even though it's a complicated thing, people understood when somebody was taking advantage of the system, they knew it was unfair. So I was proud of that.
Thank you.
I've tried hundreds of cases. The one case that comes to mind that's most important to me, I represented a young woman who had immigrated from Saudi Arabia. She came here for an education, and one day, July 4th actually, she was going home. She was observing Ramadan. She had fasted the whole day. And as she was walking to the train up the stairs, she was tackled by 4 Chicago police officers. They asked her if she was Muslim. They asked her if she was a terrorist. And all they found on her after they searched her was food. Not only did they tackle her and search her illegally, they then charged her with a crime because of the clothes she wore. We went to trial in the height of the Trump campaign. And I represented her because of the reason I represent all people. It's because of the fundamental right to a defense. And I'm proud of that. We actually won, which is a very important thing. She went on to sue. I'm hopeful that her lawsuit is successful. But that symbolizes all the work I've done on behalf of individuals.
On May 22nd, 2007, it was a Saturday morning, around 9:30 in that morning, 3 armed robbers entered the Illinois Service Savings and Loan on the south side of Chicago, and they engaged in gunfight with a security guard. One of the individuals took a young teller, 23-year-old Tremaine Gibson, who was the father of a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, grabbed him by the collar, dragged him over to the vault, and tried to get him over to open the vault, not knowing that he couldn't. He didn't have the code. He then shot him in his back, and Tremaine Gibson later died later that day from his injuries. I was the assistant United States attorney who was on duty that day, so the case became mine. I worked the case with the FBI. For the next 4 years, Tremaine's father came to court for every hearing. I tried the case. It was a slugfest. It was a 3-week trial. It was very complicated. DNA evidence, lots of testimony. But at the end of the day, when we prevailed, it was the most gratifying moment I had in my experience as a lawyer. I then argued and briefed the case before the 7th Circuit. And so this is the case that's most important to me, and Tremaine will always be part of my life.
Before Laquan McDonald, before that videotape came out, I had worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office on a civil rights case with a white officer who violently assaulted an African-American male who was handcuffed and shackled in a wheelchair. He didn't think anybody saw it, but the hospital camera did. And the case went to the state's attorney's office, and he got a slap on the wrist, he got a misdemeanor, and was about to go back to work as a beat cop. We took that case on the federal side. I worked with the Civil Rights Division, I worked with the FBI at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we prosecuted that case as a civil rights violation of the highest magnitude. And that officer ultimately had to face the consequences of what he did. He had to watch that videotape, he had to watch himself leave the hospital room, come back out, enter the room with, on video, put leather gloves on, and take out a sap, which is a leather strap with lead in it, and start beating a person who could not defend himself. And as if that wasn't good enough, as the security guards who were terrified of this officer were trying to push him into the emergency room, he just beat him one more time for good measure. We had justice in that case. The end result was justice, and that's what needs to be done, and that's what I'm going to do as the Attorney General.
Pro bono case in family court before Judge Vega, where a woman was divorced, but the house was still owned by her ex-husband and her. He was going through bankruptcy. They were going to foreclose on the house. I was able to go into court, redo the dissolution of marriage settlement, and make sure that he quit-claimed his part of the house to her. They reworked the financials, and I was able to save her house in suburban Dalton, Illinois. The other case, quickly, Plyler versus Doe. It's a U.S. Supreme Court case that says students have a right to a public education regardless of their immigration status in this country. Learned it in Barack's class in 1994 at the University of Chicago, used it as chairman of the State Board of Education in 2006 to shut down the Elmwood Park School District for one day when they failed to admit 2 undocumented students. And forevermore since then, school districts in Illinois respect the law of the land of Plyler versus Doe.
So I'm not a litigator. I worked in the regulatory side of things and fought corruption in the healthcare industry for 8 years. I know how to deal with white-collar crime, and I know how to smell it, and I know how to find it, and I know how to end it. I created a legal aid clinic in my city, which provides pro bono legal services and has provided help for over 400 people in the last 2 years in the areas of immigration, housing, and domestic violence. But the case that I'm most proud of is Friedman versus the City of Highland Park. We banned assault weapons and large capacity magazines. We were taken to district court and we prevailed. We went to the 7th Circuit and we prevailed. We were taken to the United States Supreme Court, who chose not to hear the case. And because of that case, because of the courage that I showed in leading my city and passing an assault weapons ban and standing up to the NRA, it's now constitutional to ban these weapons in Illinois.
The People versus Byron Prince. It's my first jury trial after having left the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Byron was a young man who moved here from Texas. He had his first job out of college, was driving through Calumet Park, was pulled over, asked if he was smoking weed. He volunteered his car to be searched. When the sergeant came up, he took his hands off the car and asked the sergeant, why is he being harassed? He was put into a chokehold until he was unconscious, and he was woken up with a stun gun. The officers, when the mother called, said we had to make your son eat concrete. He was charged with battery to police officer and resisting arrest. I took it to jury trial, got a not guilty verdict. The officers wanted the jury to believe that he was going to abandon his brand new car when there was no contraband in there. He has no outstanding warrants, that he was running away. That's why they tried to stop him.
Well, I represented Shelley Wernikoff against RCN. It was consumer class action where people were being charged for ringing time. Literally thousands and thousands of cell phone users were being cheated. We won the class action. They settled the case. People received a settlement. I think those class actions are extremely important for consumers in our state, and I believe in that. I also represented voters. There was a group of moms in Burbank, Illinois, who were trying to put an issue on their local ballot. They got enough signatures. They thought they were challenged. They were trying to keep off the ballot. We won the case to lower the signature requirement and give them a chance to vote on important issues for their community. And then finally, my last day as governor, I gave clemency to Tyrone Hood, who was in Menard Prison for 22 years for a murder he did not commit. I thought that was the important way to go out as governor, to make sure that justice was done, though heavens may fall.
Thank you very much. I do believe that we are coming to a close, so we will I think we can fit in 2 more questions. From another organization, would like to know, what are you most proud of having accomplished when it comes to reproductive rights? So, Mr. Goldstein, I believe that question is poised first to you.
I'm most proud of what I believe in, which is the fundamental right that all women have to reproductive rights, the right to choice. It should be unabridged in every single way. And what we've noticed is, while Illinois has many, many protections, we have to be vigilant as the border states get more and more conservative, more and more anti-choice. And I really see the history of choice and anti-choice as comes from a very bad place, the anti-choice movement, quite frankly. I don't think it's comes from the belief of all life as sanctity. I think it comes from an anti-woman belief. I actually think it comes from a very racist belief. If you look at the history of the anti-choice movement, it came out of the years of segregation. So we have to be very vigilant in standing up for it, and I'm just proud of my opinion and my views and my willingness to stand up for pro-choice.
I'm also a strongly pro-choice candidate here and feel really frankly appalled that we are having the conversations about women's access to reproductive health at all in this day and age. So it's beyond just choice. It's also access to contraceptives. It's 2018, and there are men trying to dictate to women about that. And this is what exacerbates poverty, is by depriving women of the access to this kind of reproductive health care and able to make the decisions for their bodies. So I'm doing this because I have a 27-year-old daughter, and I do not want her to be subject to the whims of the political leaders who are not acting in all of our best interests and doing more harm than they are doing good to our society.
I'm very proud as a member of the General Assembly to be on the front lines of fighting against this increasingly hostile war against women. I'm proud to have been a co-sponsor of HB 40, which we passed this year. I'm proud to make sure that bills like that pass, but I'm also proud of the work that we do to make sure that horrible bills don't pass in the General Assembly. Those bills we don't hear about a lot. But Planned Parenthood will come to me, Personal PAC will come to me and say, we have to stop that bill, Scott. And I'm proud of the fact that I'm able to reach out to my constituents and they can send emails opposing this bill to other legislators across the state of Illinois. I'm really proud that in every election that I've run prior to this one, I've had the endorsement of Personal PAC and Planned Parenthood, and I'm really proud that in this campaign, I have the support and endorsement of Personal PAC. We haven't heard from Planned Parenthood yet. I'm really proud to be on the front lines of this war. We need to have warriors, because there are people out there intent on taking the rights away from women who think that the government should be in the room with a woman. It's not just a relationship between a woman and her doctor. That's wrong.
Well, I am pro-choice without exception, and I'm proud that when I was at State Board of Education that we made sure that we kept the suits that would come from time to time for folks who wanted to insert religion into our classrooms. We kept the separation of church and state out of public and reinforced that in public schools. Proud that as Vice President of the Chicago Board of Education, I helped advocate for sex education so that young women would know about their reproductive rights and choices, and young men would also know about those as well, and making sure that even as an early age, and not all parents were in favor of it, but I think that was integral to making sure that people grow up knowing what their rights are, being responsible, having the information they need to grow up to be responsible young adults.
My first protest was in 1983, the 10th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, Keep Your Laws Off My Body. And I've since then lobbied to support HB 40, lobbied to support the ACA, which provides access to all kinds of contraceptives that previously were not available to so many women. And I'm a proud member of the board of Planned Parenthood. What we do is operate clinics. What we do is ensure access to reproductive health care. And my mission on that board is to ensure that Illinois remains the blue oasis that it is in the Midwest, and to do everything in my power to provide access to care, not just to women in Illinois, but to people within the Midwest, so that if they need to drive a day, they can get to us and they can get the care and the services that they need.
I was proud to support HB 40 because I talked a little bit about my father being one to make sure that everybody has access to health care. That goes for reproductive health care as well. And I think that was one of the most important components of HB 40. We do recognize that we have a federal government that's trying to move us backwards, so the trigger component of HB 40 was critical as well. So I was proud to support that. I was proud to open the Personal PAC envelope endorsing my candidacy as well. I was proud as a member of the Public Health Committee defeating some of the bills that try to undermine a woman's access to reproductive health care and to information from medical providers who try to withhold information because of religious reasons.
Well, I believe in the right of choice. I think it's a fundamental right of privacy, and as governor of Illinois, I defended that for 6 years. I had to win an election in 2010 against a very anti-choice candidate. They spent lots of money, and we were able to prevail. I had the support of Personal PAC in that election and every election since. I also signed the bill for the Affordable Care Act for our state to give all people a fundamental right of choice. I think it's important that health care be available to everyone, and so I think that's a key part of making sure that we have a just society. I also, as governor, signed a bill to prevent discrimination against pregnant women. Women in the workplace were oftentimes made to lift heavy boxes or denied breaks or denied water. At my behest, the legislature passed a bill. I signed it into law to make sure that no one is discriminated against because they're pregnant.
Well, I'm proud to be co-chair of Lawyers for Choice and a board member of Men for Choice, organizations that fought to get HB 40 passed, and a very important piece of legislation, and also provide escort services to women who are exercising their constitutional right and unfortunately get harassed by people who are trying to bully them into not exercising their right. And frankly, I think we need to be doing more in terms of combating crisis pregnancy centers, which are essentially trying to defraud and mislead women about their choices. And we also need to make progress on the parental notification bill that we discussed earlier. I will say, though, this is also a spot where the Attorney General has to take an important stand and be on the front lines. I was one of the people at Indivisible Chicago phone banking to the Attorney General's office, trying to convince her to join the lawsuit that other states' Attorney Generals are bringing in order to fight the Trump administration's attempt to change the contraceptive coverage in the ACA, which is wrong. So that's something I just think we need to be doing.
All right. And this is our closer. You started, right? I have not been keeping my tally. Okay, confessions. This is our closing question. So this is your opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to finish off, address anything that you perhaps may have missed during the rest of the forum. In particular, we would like to know what your role is in building the Democratic Party and what distinguishes you from the others at this, I don't know if it's one long table or two, but at the table. What distinguishes you? Yes, Ms. Fairley, go ahead.
Thank you. So the Attorney General, as the top lawyer in the state, really must set the tone and set the standards for the conduct of our political leaders. And so in my view, independence is the most important thing. So what I bring to the table is an independence from the political leadership so that I can make my decisions on what I believe is in the best interest of the citizen of the state, of the state of Illinois. Unlike some of the other candidates in this race, I have not accepted political contributions from the political leaders or from special interest groups. So in closing, what I would do is I would just ask you, if you want an attorney general working on criminal justice who's actually prosecuted murder cases? Do you want an attorney general fighting violent crime who's actually broken down firearms trafficking rings? Do you want an attorney general managing complex litigation who has managed complex litigation and done complex litigation? Do you want an attorney general working to fight to avoid rate hikes by the energy companies, who has not accepted contributions from the energy companies? If you want all of those things in your attorney general, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your girl. So I ask that you consider voting me on the March 20th primary. I really hope to have your support. My name is Sharon Fairley, SharonFairley.com for additional information. Thank you.
I'll close the way I opened. My name is Scott Drury, and I'm running for Attorney General to clean up the state of Illinois. This election provides all of the voters in this state with a great opportunity, an opportunity to finally choose an elected official, a statewide elected official, who has a history, a demonstrated history of representing you and not representing political leaders. Last year, I became the only Democrat in the House of Representatives in the last 30 years who didn't vote for Mike Madigan to be the Speaker of the House. Now, that took some courage and it showed some independence because most of the people in the state of Illinois think that his time is up. Now, my issue isn't with him. My issue is with where is the Democratic Party headed? And you look at it, we have Governor Rauner in office. We have Donald Trump in office. And in large part, those are reflections on people saying, we want to blow it up, we want to have change, we're not so convinced with what the Democrats have been doing. And we have to look at that and we have to say, what are the issues and how do we change those issues to make them better? Well, one thing we can do is we can be the party of trust. We can be the party that people can turn to and they can say, you know what, you have the right answer, not because it's political, but because it's the right thing to do. When you're passing legislation, it's not because it's going to get you votes, but it's because it's going to help people. And that's what I've been standing up for, both as a federal prosecutor and as a state representative. I don't make decisions because they're politically beneficial to me. That's not the filter that I look at. I make decisions because they're right for all of you. And sometimes that doesn't make me popular in Springfield, but it makes me sleep at night. If we want to have an attorney general who's going to change the perception of the state of Illinois, this election gives us the opportunity. My name is Scott Drury. I hope not only to earn your votes, but again, to earn your trust. Thank you.
Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you. As I typically end up saying at the end of these forums, thank God we're all Democrats. As you can see, we're not that vastly different on some of the issues. In fact, in a lot of the issues, we're pretty similar. And so how are you going to decide on March 20th or before in early voting? You're going to look at our life experiences, our professional experiences. You're going to look and see who's got the courage to do the right thing, even when it's against their own self-interest. So when I saw, and he's a friend and colleague I worked with, Forrest Claypool, trying to insert an old friend as general counsel, displace a African-American, the first African-American male general counsel that I fought to put in that position because diversity in the legal profession was important to me. And I stood up and voted against it. And when that general counsel told me that he was still being paid by his law firm and he was going to hire his own law firm, I knew it was against our conflict of interest policy at CPS. And so before I was conveniently asked, after voting against that general counsel, to move over to the Park District Board, I reported that to the chief ethics officer at Chicago Public Schools. And as cited in the Inspector General report, it was that report that ultimately led to Forrest having to resign. And I was the first person to call for his resignation. Not something I relished doing. I know he's an old friend of the mayor who appoints me to the Park District Board. And he was a colleague of mine, but it was the right thing to do. And regardless of my own interest, I stood up and I did the right thing. And as your Attorney General, I'll do the right thing by you every single day. Jesse Ruiz, jesseforillinois.com. I hope to earn your vote on March 20th.
So as Attorney General, we're tasked with protecting the life, the health, the safety, the welfare of the people of Illinois. And to do that, you need to be independent, you need to be experienced, you need to have a record of achievement and advocacy. I've talked to you this evening about my background in business, my background in law. I've also been in the executive office for 7 years. I know what it takes to serve constituents, to set an agenda, to create a culture, to pull together resources, and to move the ball forward through collaboration, making sure that we're providing voice to the voiceless in the process. It is so important right now. I mentioned this at the outset. Our civil rights and our human rights are under attack. In our Attorney General, we need to know that the person we elect will absolutely stand up and defend the fundamental rights that we cherish as Democrats. It's important to have someone who brings experience in protecting the environment. I've done that. In protecting consumer rights. I've done that. In standing up for immigrants. I've done that. In helping people who have been victims of crime. I've done that. Those are the key components that exist in the Attorney General's office. I bring that experience and I bring independence. I would love your support. I'm Nancy Rotering and I'm running for Attorney General. Thank you.
I believe you asked a question about what have you done within the Democratic Party. Well, I've been very active, and I want to make sure that I acknowledge the Democratic Chairs Association for allowing everybody to see this fine panel of candidates. The Democratic Chairs Association has been involved over the years, as have I. I've been a delegate to the last 3 Democrat national conventions. I've been involved in the party throughout the state and outside of the state, canvassing for our Democratic nominees, and not only in neighboring states, but in states as far away as Florida, because I'm a proud Democrat. Yes, we're flawed sometimes within our own house, but the only way you could clean it up is to be active with it, not just by throwing stones at it. So I'm a proud Democrat. I'm not just going to spend all my time criticizing the Democratic Party, because if I were, I would be running as an independent. I'm a proud Democrat. I like the values of the Democratic Party. It's what's allowed me to abolish the death penalty in the state of Illinois, pass the Voting Rights Act, get a constitutional amendment protecting voting rights, pass legislation protecting victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. I did that coalescing with my Democrats all across the state. I'm a proud Democrat. I'm not going to run as a Democrat throwing stones at other Democrats.
Well, I believe the Attorney General has to be the lawyer for the people of Illinois, and you have to know the people. I've represented people. I've represented taxpayers and consumers and workers. I've represented veterans and voters and people concerned about the environment, people with disabilities. I think you have to really know the people if you're going to be a good Attorney General. Now, more than ever, it's important that we take on Trump and his allies when they break the Constitution or break the law. Excuse me, it's very, very important that we have an Attorney General who's always there for everyday people. That's the job of this Attorney General's Office of Illinois. You also have to lead the people when it comes to the law. I signed the bill to end the death penalty. I signed the bill to establish marriage equality in this state. That's where the law leads the people. And I think it's important that we continue to do that. I think we need an ethics initiative in Illinois, where the people of Illinois, by petition and referendum, can put stronger ethics laws on the ballot and pass them, even if the legislators don't like it. So I think it's really important to have an Attorney General who understands what grassroots democracy is all about. That's what the Democratic Party is all about. It's making sure everyday people bubble up their ideas so it's enacted into law. And the Attorney General can help draft those laws, advocate those laws, and make them part of our Constitution and our laws of Illinois.
Well, I think the question was about how we differentiate ourselves from the other candidates. And I'm the only person at this long table who's not an elected politician or an appointee of Rahm. I'm not friends with Rahm. You know, he's not pointing me to things. I'm an independent person. I'm a former prosecutor. I'm a litigator. I'm a lawyer. And I think this should be a lawyer's job, not a politician's job. And I think what we want to elect is somebody who's going to be a great lawyer for the people. I am a proud Democrat, but I think what's great about the Democratic Party are activists like the people I work with at Indivisible Chicago and Lawyers for Choice and the Sierra Club, people who are working hard, and frankly, we need a Democratic Party that is more bottom up instead of top down, because frankly, the insiders and politicians that we keep electing in Springfield have not been doing a good job for our state and have not been doing a good job for our party. Because as I go across this state, I've talked to a lot of people who've lost faith in our own party's leadership, which is really a damn shame. Now, I'm running a different kind of race than a lot of the people up here. I am running a grassroots campaign. I have thousands of donations, literally thousands of small donations under $100. I'm not taking special interest money. My biggest fundraiser is my dog. I put photos of my dog on Twitter, and people tweet photos back of of their dogs, and I've been getting lots of contributions thanks to Bear the dog. But I will tell you, it's a different kind of campaign with thousands of volunteers making hundreds of thousands of phone calls and texting hundreds of thousands of voters. That's what's making the difference. That's the kind of campaign I'm trying to run. Join me, join our campaign. Thank you.
I am a proud Democrat, but I'm a proud Democrat because of the values of the Democratic Party. If the Democratic Party is not standing up for us and not standing up for justice, I'm going to throw stones. So please forgive me for throwing stones, because I'm going to speak the truth. When there was a mention that everyone else is an elected politician, let me tell you the political office that I won. I ran against a 40-year incumbent machine politician to get an unpaid job as a 33rd Ward committeeman. So please forgive me for being an elected politician. But we must stand up to wrong. We must stand up for justice. I don't care if it's the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Green Party. It doesn't matter. We are going to make our party great if we stand up for all of us. And to say, well, we're not going to throw stones, then that means we're not going to move forward. And I want our party to move forward, to have a bold, progressive agenda that stands up against racism, that stands up against sexism, that fights for real criminal justice reform, and stands up against the big powers. Because the problem is we're on the take by the big powers. We're getting money not me, from the big tobacco companies and the big utility companies, coal companies. That's got to stop because the Democratic Party is about us. And until we start representing us, then we're not truly Democrats. And that's what I'll be as your Attorney General.
Thank you very much. Let's give a great big round of applause first for all of our candidates.